Retirement could be one of the biggest decisions of your lifetime. And if you're faced with having to make the choice between taking a pension or taking a lump sum rollover, this could cause things to come to an even more climactic situation. Today, we're going to dive into the specifics around both options, why it might make sense to choose one over the other, in addition to some of the situations that we've seen play out over time where participants might have chosen the pension route, the lump sum route, or the hybrid route. I think it's helpful for today's purposes to use a story of our two hypothetical clients, John and Mary. After decades of steady work and saving, John and Mary came to a critical point on their retirement journey, making the decision between taking John's pension or taking it as a lump sum rollover. In their case, this decision ended up bringing them extreme anxiety as they had so many variables to choose from. Like one, would they outlive their money if they chose one option over the other? Number two, would they have assets to pass to their heirs? And number three, did they really want to deal with the potential volatility that the markets could bring? In John's case, he always valued stability and structure, so the thought of having a consistent payout via a traditional pension was really attractive to him. Oftentimes, the traditional pension route offers up a systematic structure as far as pension payments are concerned over a certain period of time, whether it's for one's life or one's life and their spouse. However, it doesn't allow to pass the money to beneficiaries after both the individual and the spouse have passed. For John, the fear of outliving his money kept him up at night over multiple times through the course of his career. So having that structured payment system in place that could last a lifetime was very crucial for him. And some research tends to justify John's thoughts. According to a recent study by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, just about 73% of those individuals who received a pension in a structured traditional sense were able to maintain steady spending within 5 years of retiring. In contrast, only about 56% of those individuals that chose to take a lump sum were able to do the same. And this statistic underscores the potential stability that the traditional pension structure brings, which leads John to believe he's making the right choice in taking those systematic payments. Mary, however, had a very different perspective on things. With her background as a small business owner, Mary was faced with multiple situations over time through the course of her career where she had to manage risk and make decisions on the fly. To her, she greatly values flexibility and control, so the thought of taking a lump sum distribution and rolling it into an IRA was a more attractive option. The prospect of having a large pool of money with flexibility in retirement seemed much more attractive than being stuck to a fixed schedule of payments over time. She also brought up the thought of their children, and which option might give them more of a benefit to leave a legacy behind for them. Mary's hope was that by taking the route and taking that lump sum money, rolling it into an IRA, and having the potential for growth over time, that they would be able to manage things necessary and still be able to leave a legacy for the kids when they're gone. Naturally, this difference in preference between John and Mary could create tension. John being drawn to the thought of stability and fixed payments over time versus Mary, who valued flexibility, the potential for growth, and especially leaving a legacy for her kids. It's important to note, as with many decisions in life, these situations are no different and they come with trade-offs as well. John realized that although he might really crave the feeling of stability, that making this decision could potentially hinder their ability to leave money behind for their children. And Mary acknowledges that by taking the lump sum, although she could have more control, potential for growth, and may be able to leave an inheritance behind, she could also be exposing their family to market risk, and she might have to pay more close attention to this situation over time. This brings us to the point where understanding these potential trade-offs in depth can be crucial. And while each situation can come with its own strengths and weaknesses, it's important to understand what you value. So here's some of the considerations that we take into account when we help clients work through this process. First and foremost, taking something into account that we may have all felt at some point during our lifetimes, depending on which generation you are, is inflation. Some pensions automatically include cost of living adjustments, where the payouts can increase over time to adjust for inflation, very similarly to something like you might see within Social Security. For retirees who have access to this feature, it means that their income could theoretically potentially keep up with the changing costs of things like groceries, medical expenses, and even rent payments. It's also important to remember that not all pension plans offer these cost of living adjustments. So before you dive into making your decision and fully commit, understand your plan. Another important factor to consider is that these structured payments provided by pensions don't typically offer too much flexibility. Once you start receiving those pension payouts, you might not necessarily be able to access lump sums of capital, whether it be for emergencies or even different investment opportunities. In the event that something unexpected does arise, you might be forced to end up having to liquidate other assets and/or taking some sort of debt. In addition to these two factors, something that we often speak about with our clients is legacy planning. As I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, pensions might offer a few different options which provide a mixture of anything from taking a full sum of money on one person's life, being that original owner, all the way to being able to split up that money, whereas your spouse would be able to continue the payments for the rest of their life as well. The caveat being here, after both of those folks pass away, those payments stop. And naturally, in some cases, this could end up resulting in a much smaller legacy left behind for the loved ones that you care about. On the other hand, also important to look at some of the positives when it comes to those structured pension payments. Specifically, not having to deal with the ups and downs of the stock market. In addition, having these structured pension payouts over time could also help simplify your financial management. Not having to update your allocations, make important investment decisions, or even finding yourself glued to your investment app every single day could be something that many value. And while some of these appealing characteristics of having these periodic pension payments could seem like a no-brainer, there are caveats on the other end of the spectrum that we need to consider as well. Not being locked into those systematic payments and having the potential for growth over time, which could translate into having more flexibility and allowing you to spend what you want when you want, could seem like a better option for some. Having that flexibility, whether in the form of investment management, tax planning, or even access to large sums of money, whether it's to splurge on a large trip, or maybe the purchase of a new vehicle, are all some of the potential positives that could come with that lump sum option. And beyond spending, taking the lump sum could even open doors to potential future growth. In Mary's situation, she sees this as an opportunity to tailor the investments more towards her goals and her risk tolerance, which aligns better with what she feels comfortable with, as again, taking some additional risk to potentially add growth to the picture could prove beneficial for their family. When having these discussions, we do find personally that it could be important to consider some of the risks that come with the perceived freedom as well. First and foremost, if you choose to take out a lump sum and you don't roll that money into a pre-tax account, you could end up finding yourself in quite the predicament as far as tax ramifications are concerned. In addition, factors like sequence of return risk, market risk, or even timing of withdrawals could all play into your situation and in some instances provide some less than desirable results. Despite these challenges, we have often seen folks go this route as they're willing to accept the extra responsibility that comes with managing and planning over time. The feeling of empowerment that could come with this flexibility in making decisions, whether it be for your future and your retirement, or the future of your children and leaving a legacy, could be of the utmost importance to you. So how do we weigh out these potential risks with their potential rewards? Well, one of the rules that we stick to when making this decision is the 6% rule. In simple terms, if the annual pension payout is greater than 6% of the lump sum offered, taking those systematic payments could be the better option. If the annual pension payments are less than 6% of that lump sum offered, taking the lump sum could be more beneficial. And while this rule doesn't provide a final answer for you, it does give us a place to start the discussion. Let's look at how this works in practice. Taking John, for example, where he can either take a lump sum of $1 million to roll into an IRA, or he can receive $4,500 per month in monthly payments. Multiply that $4,500 a month by 12 months, and you get $54,000 annually. Now you take that $54,000 and divide it by $1 million, and you receive a percentage of 5.4%. Since this is just below that 6% threshold, one might argue that taking the lump sum could be the better benefit. I also want to caution, it is important to recognize the limitations of simple math. This 6% rule doesn't factor in several potential issues that could have an impact on your retirement. For example, it ignores inflation. And if your pension doesn't allow for a cost of living adjustment over time, your purchasing power could slowly decrease as you age. What feels like enough income today might not stretch as far in 15 to 20 years. On the other hand, the 6% rule also does not factor in the potential for investment returns that you might experience through the course of retirement. Historically, the S&P 500 has achieved rates of return on an annual basis greater than 6%. However, this could come with its own set of risks, specifically market risk. Stock market returns aren't guaranteed and oftentimes do come with volatility. A third piece of the puzzle that's not included in this 6% rule is life expectancy. If you're in excellent health or you have a family history of longevity, that pension payout for an extended period of time could become increasingly valuable as you get further into retirement. Conversely, if you have a short life expectancy or you're not in great health, taking that lump sum could end up proving beneficial to your loved ones and your heirs. And although our focus today has primarily been around financial factors, there are also personal factors that no formula could ever match. The 6% rule doesn't know anything about your financial goals, your family, or your risk tolerance. Therefore, taking into account a myriad of factors over time when working through your retirement plan could be beneficial. In addition, as with other situations in life, there might not be a perfect answer. In the case of John and Mary, balancing priorities required honest conversation and the ability to compromise. In their case, taking the hybrid feature, which some plans do allow for, ended up being the great decision for them. Taking a partial lump sum withdrawal and rolling it into an IRA, in addition to a decreased periodic payment amount from the traditional pension, allowed both John and Mary to check the boxes that were important in their lives. It is important to note here that this option, as I stated earlier, is not always available. So before making any decisions, check with your plan administrator. In John and Mary's case, they opted for a 75-25 split, where John had the comfort in knowing that about 75% of those pension payments were structured and periodic over time, they covered all of their mandatory living expenses, and Mary still had the ability to roll out 25% into an IRA and manage the money with John towards their goals of leaving a legacy. And this split wasn't just arbitrary. It was based on their goals, it was based on the things that were important to them, and it was based on the features available in their plan. When we work through these decisions with clients, we try to first and foremost understand what is important to them. And from there, we can conceptualize a list of priorities to start working towards. As always, we recommend speaking with your team of trusted professionals to try to make heads or tails of what's most important in your decisions. And if you find yourself in a tug of war and trying to make the best choices for you and your retirement outcomes, check out our next video here.